Good evening. Nice you're joining this livecast of Pakhuis de Zwijger and Material District. A warm welcome. A revolution is going on in the construction world, and wood is playing a big role. Because of the development of mass timber, more specifically CLT, crossed laminated timber, wood nowadays can compete with the more traditional materials such as steel and concrete. It's equally strong. Less CO2 is emitted during production, and wood is works as a carbon dioxide storage. So many advantages, and therefore, the future might be built out of wood. But what are the consequences for the the planning and the spatial quality of our cities? That's the question we're going to talk about tonight, and I'll be doing that with 5 guests tonight. I'll start with the ones on Zoom. First of all, Sabine Lebesque. She's working as advisor of spatial quality at the municipality of Amsterdam, in which she focuses on the spatial quality of buildings and public spaces in the city. Welcome, Sabine. Also,
I hope you hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. There's a little bit delay, but yeah, we hear you clearly. And also on Zoom, live from the UK, Andrew Waugh. He's the director and founder of Waugh Trussell Architects, where he focuses on producing thoughtful and sustainable projects in its own neighborhood and beyond. And they have designed the largest CLT building in the world, Dalston Works. Hello, Andrew. Great you can join.
Hi.
Hi. And here in the studio, we have Dolianne Vermeulen, architect, director, and co-founder of Team V Architecture, where she and her team designed the highest timber residential tower in the Netherlands, here in Amsterdam, called Hout. Julian Knijtijzer, founder and director of architecture firm Finch Buildings. He focuses on designing modular buildings that can be adjusted to different kinds of environments with a minimal CO2 footprint. And Bjarne Masterbroek, architect, director and founder of Search, the company responsible for designing the wooden Jakarta Hotel in Amsterdam, which is actually our neighbors, just on the other side of the water. And of course, you can join as well. You can do that by going to the website, log on to Zoom, and there you have 2 options. Either you can go to the chat, there you are in touch with the other viewers, or you can push the Q&A button, and then you can ask questions to the guests here in the studio. And if you direct the question, I'll be sure that the right person gives the right answer. And I would really recommend you to do so. All right, let's start. Yeah, Bjarne. Like I said, you as an architect, you took on the job to design one of the first timber hotels in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. What was for you the trigger to start building with bio-based materials?
Well, it started in fact with a private client in 2003 who said, I would like to have a house, a private house. He bought an old farm. And we have to completely, here you see it on the photo, we have to destroy let's say, the part where the animals live, and we have to rebuild it. It's too big, it's too old. We demolish it, and we rather like to have a wooden building. They even thought of sheep wool insulation and things like that. So
because of sustainability.
Yeah, it was more of a hunch. They didn't have a real clue, but they said, would be nice if there is no concrete or steel in it.
And what did you think as an architect?
And then I thought, nice question.
Yeah? You felt challenged,
yeah.
or?
Said, I have no clue, so let's see what we do.
Really? Okay.
Like Pippi Langkous said. I don't know how to do it, so I can probably do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to do it, it's much nicer to do it, of course. So we started to develop the project, and absolutely having no clue at all. And about half a year later, we ended up with this idea of using CLT. We made a whole package. Also, 3D modeling started to become serious at that moment. I think we even used a little program that Renault used at that time in the factory, in their developments. And then, so we had this sort of nesting program, or how to put the elements of CLT as efficient as possible in one plate. And then it was cut out in, I think, Austria. A couple of trucks came in.
And did it work out well?
And I was astonished because, as you see, it's a tapered volume. with all angles are different. It looks simple, but it's not. It's not at all. It came in, a couple of construction workers from Austria came with the project. They put on socks over their shoes. I mean, foreign construction workers can work quite precise and neat compared to some Dutch. And 6 days later, the whole thing was finished. So I was completely flabbergasted how fast. Of course, we still had to do insulation, covering, put in window frames, but the whole damn thing was there in 6 days. So I thought...
It really convinced you, in a way.
I thought, that's really nice. And you couldn't even put let's say, a Bible paper between the two different elements. It was so precise. So that is what convinced us most.
Yeah.
Also because all the finishings were done. And then all the door frames were also in, because we just cut out the door frames in that CLT element. So it was more expensive, but it turned out to be cheaper in the end. Because
so you started with a farm, and now you're ending up with a huge hotel.
Yeah. And then it lasted for another 5-6 years that we came up with a new project in wood, which was a balloon frame system. But we still kept that idea of we should do more in wood. And it seriously took off when we had this tender of Hotel Jakarta, where we just reversed the whole idea of a client that comes to you. We thought we go to a client. We select a hotel partner. We're going to do this tender for him and her. And we do it in wood. Why not?
And how hard was it to convince them?
Well, the funny thing is, he said, I mean, he's an entrepreneur, so he thought, well, if I can have a hotel at that place, that would be nice. But at the same time, he said, no way that I'm going to win a tender on that spot, because it will be the big chains of hotels that's going to win this spot. He said, well, wait a minute. Because the whole selection procedure is around, let's say, sustainability and building quality, architecture, and 10% is about money. So I think we could go for a good scheme. Yeah. So it was also a new way of designing, because you, as an architect, especially people who are not professionally involved in our field of work, they think architecture is about aesthetics, and it's about colors and form, and it's very creative. Well, it isn't. It's very much technology. And here we reversed the whole design process. So it was not around designing a hotel. It was about engineering a new building system, and therefore coming up with new ideas. So, and I like that very much, because you come up with lots of stuff, lots of things, details that you would never do from an aesthetic point of view, but you simply do it because of the choices you have, or the strategies you have to follow. And that's also what the material tells you, in a way. Yeah, and so here, this tender we simply won by calculative strategy. We knew what to do, how many points to get, etc. Yeah. And did it turn out to be much more expensive than it would have been with traditional materials, or? We have never talked about money. Okay, then we skip that. I know. The thing is, it sounds strange, but when the focus was not about money here, because he said, just do it. And a couple of days before we had to deliver the tender, he said, let's not deliver, because I don't think it's going to work. I said, come on, I worked my ass. All this work. I worked my ass off. Now we're gonna. And his wife said, come on, let's go in. Yeah. Let's see. And we won by a margin you can't imagine. So that was because of all those, let's say, more pragmatic choices we made. Yeah. Dojana, do you recognize this story, like the reverse designing and the technology?
Yeah, that and the tender part as well, because the timber building, the timber hybrid hout that we work on, came to be because of a similar tender with a strong focus on sustainability. Yeah, here it is. It's still in the building phases. As we speak, it's being built. Yeah, so they're now unwrapping the present, if you like. They're taking down the scaffolding and finishing off the facade. So they've had the highest point, and all the timber is in place. So it's really going to be there, visible as well in the summer, I think. Yeah. And what was for you the reason to do it in timber and bio-based materials? It's same as Bjarne explained, actually. It was a tender written out by the municipality of Amsterdam. I think it's one of the very good mechanisms to really push innovation and sustainability. And we teamed up with Lingotto and Arab, and it was for a residential tower, 73 meters high. And Matthew Vola from Arab said, well, we can do this in timber, mostly timber. And then we thought it can cut, actually, it can help us on all the 3 points of scoring in the tender, both on architecture and kind of urban qualities, because you can see the timber in the apartments, also in the plinth. Also on sustainability, of course, because of the innovative material. But it would also help us really this was one of the last projects in Amsterdam that was fully free market, so vrij sector, for sale, high-end apartments. And we all thought it would really also attract a nice group of residents that are also interested in sustainability. And therefore also be more marketable in that sense, which is not necessarily, well, sounds like a bad thing, but it's also actually a good thing, right?
Yeah, so people with money, but also with an idea about sustainability.
Yeah, so we focused on 3 things, on timber structure, on solar panels in the facade, so there's a lot of solar energy that we gain, just like Hotel Jakarta again, actually. And it's got really big outside terraces on all the apartments. It's got a really big kind of open plinth with a sports club in it.
So what does the smoothie has to do with it?
Well, the sports bar actually serves healthy food too. So it's also one of the things that we'll talk about later, is if you build high, you have to really make sure you also engage the street level, and you really make sure that you have a nice environment where this building lands. Yeah. That's one of the things that we're trying to do in Hout.
Yeah, let's focus on that indeed a bit further on. Are there more projects you did with wood or timber?
We work on. We're currently working on the new Dutch headquarter for DPG Media, which is a big office building with a hybrid timber structure that will be built next to their current printing facilities. Here you see it on the water. So that's really a kind of, again, a high-end timber hybrid structure. I think it's over 43,000 square meters, so it's a large building. And I mean, one of the fun things that I find about projects like this, and I think we'll all have that feeling tonight, is that when you try and do something that is kind of both sustainable and relatively innovative still, there's a lot of enthusiasm surrounding a project like that. Everyone kind of just runs the extra mile, pushes extra hard, and therefore, it gets also, you get a good team.
Yeah. Oh, that's
feeling.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to Andrew. Do you recognize this? What Dojana says, like that you experience quite a lot of enthusiasm because of the sustainability and the new way of building.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, occasionally,
Sometimes
you get some
not.
people who are a little difficult about it. We've been building the same way for a very long time. So it's occasionally, you have to work hard to change minds. But actually, no, I totally agree with Dojana. I think it's been, we certainly couldn't have built the buildings that we've completed without a truly kind of collaborative process from both engineers and manufacturers, clients, contractors, local city. So definitely, definitely recognize
because how long ago did you decide to start building with bio-based materials?
Well, funnily enough, the same time as Bjarne, 2003, and in fact, I remember his building really well.
Really?
Because it was something that they were talking about at the time. And in 2003, I mean, they were kind of, I think there was 1 or 2 companies that were making CLT, and it was pretty rare. And I also have to say as well, Bjarne, that I went and stayed in your hotel the week it opened because I was so excited about it.
And what did you think?
And I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was beautiful. And
thank you.
I hugged all the columns and I loved it. It was great.
That's quite a compliment because, well, actually, do you consider yourself as being a pioneer in CLT timber building in the UK?
In the UK, I guess, yeah. I mean, it's kind of accidental pioneer, really. We didn't, I think that, you know, the first tall building that we did in 2007, 2008, that was pretty pioneering. In fact, at the time, the inventor of CLT invited me over to Rome and for some conference, and I went, and he took me to one side in a cafe and he said, "Look, I have to say, I think this is a really bad idea. It's really, we didn't really design the material for this. We designed it for single family houses and nursery schools." And, you know, and I was like, oh God, I'm already on site.
No way back.
So I guess that felt, pretty pioneering at the time.
Yeah, and then, well, you decided to design the Dalston Works, which is it still the biggest CLT building in the world?
I doubt it. I really doubt it.
That's not
I don't
interesting.
know, but I doubt it.
How many steps is in the tower?
No, okay. But can you give us
big
some?
Anyway.
So yeah, it's big. It's quite huge. Can you give us some examples? Because you've been working in different countries all over Europe, maybe even the world. You designed quite a lot of buildings. Can you give us some examples?
So we completed about 25, 26 CLT projects now in the UK and in France. We currently have projects in large office building in Milan. Another secret one in Amsterdam, which is just under wraps still right now, but that should come through soon.
I've heard about it.
And another one in the States. But certainly kind of, I think, you know, for many years, we were building lots and lots of residential buildings. And in the last couple of years, that's really changed to get a lot more office buildings, a lot more demand for office buildings in timber.
Mm. So yeah, maybe because later on we're going to focus a bit more on the Netherlands. How is in general, how is the progression of building with bio-based materials in the UK?
Well, when we started, it was really, everybody was really excited, and kind of unfortunately we had the terrible tragedy of the fire in Grenfell Tower 3 years ago now.
Which was a CLT building.
No. It was a concrete.
That was okay.
It was a terribly, dishonestly, badly built concrete building, refurbished concrete building, nothing to do with timber at all. In fact, the timber fire doors were one of the only things that kept the fire out.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's been a lot of nervousness now in the industry and a lot of changes in perception. So that's been quite difficult for the last couple of years. Even though it had nothing to do with timber, it's just changed the perception.
The reputation.
And also in the UK, and the reputation. And in the UK, you know, we don't have the kind of, I think, kind of advanced kind of tender mechanisms that you have in the Netherlands. We just don't have in the UK. It's very much more a kind of dog-eat-dog kind of capitalist kind of market, you know, so money wins out. Money is the only kind of, you know, too often, which is why you end up with situations like Grenfell, unfortunately. But so it's been a bit more challenging the last few years, for sure. And also we don't have the same kind of level of ambition around sustainability that you have in... You
don't?
No, not really.
Well, Andrea has, but the UK hasn't.
Yeah, no, I understand, yeah.
But do you think...
I have, yeah.
Yeah, no, sure.
I'll make up for the rest of the UK.
Yeah. Lonesome cowboy. Bjarne, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was wondering if you think that the Brexit makes it easier or more difficult for you too.
A bit of both, really. A bit of both. I mean, you know, it's kind of, it makes it, we're able to change our building codes more quickly, you know, in some ways, but also, you know, we don't adhere to some of the kind of more ambitious European regulations around sustainability. And so I think that at the moment, you know, following Brexit, the UK is in a position that it will just kind of please anybody that asks, because we're desperate to be included. It's very sad. Anyway, so let's not get stuck on that.
Okay.
I'll start crying.
It is. I know.
Yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, Jurian. So actually we've seen quite some large-scale projects, which is possible. It shows the possibilities of timber, but obviously they're not the only possibilities and advantages. And you, with your company, you focus a bit more on the different, on other...
Yeah, actually what we do mostly is we have a modular system, so that's what we do. And we focus mainly on the bulk of buildings, I always say. So I want to change the general way of building, and not so much the specials and the museums and the hotels maybe, but we want to make sure that people can live in a timber building. And for that we have came up with a platform, a Finch Buildings platform as we call it, and that enables us as Finch Buildings, but also other people and other companies to build in a build timber buildings, but then in a way that everything is already pre-engineered. So we know everything about the fire regs, the acoustic regulations and stuff like that. Everything is solved, and it's actually a building package for making a timber building.
And how, like, it's a platform, but does it mean it's open sourced, or? It's
not completely open source yet. So we're working on opening the system for partners. My goal with Finch Buildings is to have so much impact on the environment, the most impact as possible. And if you do everything yourself and you design everything yourself, your impact will also be limited a bit. So that's why we try to open up the system and work together and collaborate with other people to have the most impact possible.
Yeah. So what we see an example here.
This is one of the bigger buildings that we're currently having in the building permit phase in Alkmaar, and I'm quite proud about this one. Not so much about the architecture, but really much about the fact that it's socialized housing and middle rent sector. So that means that we can cater for also the low income housing as well. And that's what I'm really proud of. And we're also doing a project in Monnikendam at the moment. It's being built at this moment, and it's also interesting because you build modular, you can also build really fast. So we started the foundation works in January this year, and the delivery will be done in the summer. It's actually this building, and it's 62 apartments. It's free sector to buy, let's say. It's also socialized rent. So everything is in this building that you see on the normal market in the Netherlands. So what we try to prove with this building is not so much that we wanted to create the most beautiful architecture. We wanted to show that you can do normal buildings in timber and also in modular.
Yeah. And how does it work with this platform?
Yeah, so what we have done is we have created different measurements of modules, but also different ingredients. So what we always say is that we have, let's say, a package of components, and with these components we can compose our buildings, and other people can do that as well. We can collaborate with another architect, for example, to create a building based on our platform, based on the standardized details. But as you can see, the facade, the way the building looks can completely differ.
Yeah, because this is an interesting one. This has a brick facade.
Yeah, it has a brick facade in this case because the environment really asks for a brick facade. It's in an old industrial area. So we said, okay, let's prove that we can also do a building that's clad in brick. But completely based in the internal structure of this building is completely CLT and modular.
Yeah, and because, so you really believe in this modular way of prefabricated.
Yeah, and I can explain also why. Because I think that if you build in a factory, you can be more precise, as Björn already pointed out. You can really build on a millimeter accuracy. Yeah. But it also means that you can get scale into something. And if you can get scale, then you can lower the price. And then in the end, we need so many houses in the Netherlands and actually everywhere in Europe as well. So what we try to do is to create scale in factories to make sure that the price also goes down.
Yeah, so you actually say, well, the bigger the project, the cheaper it will be because we can...
Yeah, or actually the more we can do in a year in the factory. So projects themselves don't have to be really big. Of course, it's nice because then you get to scale faster. But we can also combine a lot of projects and then make sure that the factory is completely fully operated in the best way possible.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a little bit the other way around than the way you did your projects. What do you think when you hear Jurian?
I think it's a very the whole way of thinking from a modular system is really clever to do. It makes it a lot more controlled as well, and your kind of learning cycle gets faster and more solid. At the same time, I also think that it will really work for a lot of types of building, not all types of building. So I think, but I think Jurian agrees on that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just a very good way for specific types of buildings. is not the only solution. But I think that it's important to realize that none of what we're speaking about today or tonight is the only solution in itself. You really need to broaden your entire sense of what's important.
I think it's also two different things. I mean, since, let's say, 1920, as Le Corbusier did, there was always this idea of making housing more modular and more prefabricated as a unit, which means floor, ceiling, walls, a shoebox. And that has been lingering around for a century.
New.
And it never was very successful. And you could say now is the time again to try it again, because computerization.
Because why wasn't it successful?
It turns out that the building, I think that if there's one big misunderstanding that architects, but many people make, is that look at car manufacturing. That is all prefabricated. It's mass production, and housing should be like that. But there's a big difference between everything we design on this world that is not, let's say, connected to the crust of the earth, or housing or buildings. Let's say buildings in general, because they are fixed. They're there for a long, long time, and they become. Let's say our building culture. They become. We get our identity through way more through building than any other stuff. Somebody in Manhattan is proud of being a New Yorker is proud of Manhattan. Someone from Paris is proud of what Paris is, or Rome, or Amsterdam, or whatever. So I think buildings serve much more than becoming just a prefabricated unit. So I like to build in wood very much, and I like to deal a lot with prefabrication and modularity, but I don't want to be stuck in those shoebox at a certain moment. That okay, now we can travel over the road like 350, and maybe in a couple of years' time 5 meters, which means that's the only freedom I have to build my either hotel room or housing for people who just buy their own first small house. So there is one thing I think is very good what you do, very, very good, because if you have that bulk of building in wood, it gives you so he does a tremendously important thing, which is about coding, building coding, knowing how it works with soundproofness, with fireproofness, all that stuff. And at the same time, as an architect, I'm first of all interested in architectural quality, in living quality, in making a very, very good environment. And therefore, I think architects in general, and also the main public, should urge for wood as a alternative to more pollutive materials, which is concrete steel.
Yep.
Maybe I say two small things. One thing is that I totally agree that not all the buildings can be done in timber and modular, maybe. But I always compare ourselves with in concrete you have the tunnel system. And actually we are the exactly. That's always also the same. So we're
that I understand. But the tragic thing is, of course, with the tunnel system in concrete, that they blow you away because they go to 9 meters now, 10 meters almost, and you go to 4 or 5.
That's the second thing I want to say.
So you become very vulnerable if you have to compete with that wide tunnel.
Yeah, but we have two modules that we can connect.
Exactly.
So then you can do bigger apartments. So that's there are options.
The shoebox idea. What he said, like if it's all modular and all like the speed is so high, you have
Yeah, actually, I think that, as I said, I don't think you should do a sport hall in modular. That's not so smart. But apartment buildings with different facades, with different kind of typologies, are all able to do. We're all able to do that in our system. But maybe there is one picture that shows that we have a bigger apartment with two modules next to each other, and then you
that's very nice.
Apartment. Yeah. So then you lose the shoebox effect, and then you can do it. Then you still have the pros of making something in a factory and really fast, but you lose at least some of the cons that you would have to work in the system.
Yeah. So the advantages are the speed and also the costs. But
mostly, of course, the CO2 reduction. So our buildings are carbon negative or neutral for at least. And the fact that it's also very nice and healthy to live in is also important. We didn't mention that yet, but living in timber also means that you have a better air quality, for example, and that you feel more at ease.
And that's also the reason why you chose timber, because, well, modular building, you can also do it with concrete or...
Exactly, yeah, but for me, concrete is a dead end. To be honest, I think that we should use it for the cores, and also in these buildings that we're doing, there's also concrete cores in the middle. But yeah, you have to skip it if you can.
Yeah.
I hope to make foundations in plastic waste and then wood on top.
Amazing. Yeah.
Also concrete out there.
Yeah.
So
that would be good.
great. So
we're trying to find out how to do that.
Interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have a question by Wieke to Bjarne and Do-Janne. It turned out that CLT is very expensive, 50% more than traditional non-sustainable materials. We totally understand that to make a difference in sustainability, scale is needed. And individual builders can't provide that scale. But it's very unfortunate that individuals are more or less forced to build non-sustainable. Do you have an advice for individual CLT builders?
Yeah, but it's not more expensive. That's the first misunderstanding.
Isn't it?
It's not. No, it's cheaper.
But the facts, they...
No, I can tell you a few facts. What do you think? First of all, you come up to a building site with a lot of wood. From that wood, you build a cast form. Then you come up with trucks where you pour in concrete that is manufactured, and you put in there a lot of steel. And then you come with trucks, you take the wood away, and then you have the concrete. Yeah. Or you have wood that is grown by water and sun, but for free, completely for free. You build a CLT product out of it. One truck, you put it there, it's done. So what do you think is more expensive?
Yeah, but that's maybe even on the bigger scale. You're an ambassador, but
the issue is that we have so much more concrete in the world. Actually, the mass of concrete is almost more than there is biomass
at the moment.
That's insane. So if you compare that also to pricing, I already explained that scale makes the price low.
And the price of concrete is hidden, because it's hidden in terms of pollution
for sure.
that we have to deal with in the future. So in the end, that's what I'm saying. If we look at of course, if you now buy a wall of wood, it might be more expensive, but you don't have to plaster it, you don't have to paint it, whatever.
But I think one of the most important points you're making, which we also found in both projects, and they're big projects, is that they are both commercially viable projects, non-subsidized, big, large-scale timber buildings. And the business case for both is coming out okay. And I think the most important thing is to look at the whole bigger picture. So that's I think what Bjarne is saying too. Look at it like stichtingskostenoverzicht in Dutch. Look at it from the whole investment to the whole end of life.
Yeah.
And then very soon, the speed of building, for instance, is often for office buildings a really large factor. If you can cut down 5 or 6 months out of your building time, you have less rent at the place you're in, so you can move sooner. So you can skip costs there. So I think even on those two very, very complex projects, and Hout is not a very good one. I know it's super high end, but the complexity of what's happening there in the ground with all its piles and foundations and trains and tracks and everything means that it's still a good business case for a building like this in this location at this height. Then it should really be possible already to do it, even for mid-level or social rent. The only thing really is that I think the workings on the market, and we were talking about it before we started the cameras, is that the ups and downs in demand and supply are much bigger, and they're much more often suddenly uneven.
Let's focus on that later on. That's a good point, so remember it. But the only thing is that for an individual builder, it's maybe a bit more complicated. Still.
I think also what we see is that smaller contractors, they already have invested in concrete stuff. So they have the casts and they have all these things already invested in. So then it's really difficult to shift towards timber all of a sudden. So that's a difference.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
There's another question by Geert to all speakers. But how can we be sure to have enough wood to fulfill the demand in a circular way? I have to point out that last episode, we really focused on this one. So I would actually recommend to look to that episode, because actually I want to continue to the spatial quality. Nevertheless, thank you for your question, Geert. Sabine.
Maybe one remark on that, because that's, I think, crucial to me, is we need to plant trillions and trillions of trees. As long as we do that, wood building is fine. If we forget to do that, better stop wood building.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think there's enough space for trillions?
Oh, more than enough.
Yeah.
More than enough.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sabine, sorry for waiting. Like I said, you're working on spatial quality within the municipality of Amsterdam. Maybe you can explain us a little bit more about your function.
Yes, I will try. It's kind of a big name for the work I do. I want to be modest. It's not that I decide about spatial quality. That should be impossible. Then I should be the head of Welstand Commission and all the people above that. I am responsible within Grond en Ontwikkeling, our department, for the documentation every year gebouwd in Amsterdam, and that collects all the buildings every year that are finished. And in that sense, with that input, I can see what's happening over the years. And since I'm an architecture historian, I try sometimes to say something about spatial quality.
And so, with this spatial quality in mind, what's your view on this whole transition of timber building?
Yes, well, let's first look back to what history has brought us. It's not the first time that we change our focus to an other material. In the first place, Amsterdam was built fully or mostly in a certain time with wood. Amsterdam is built on piles, as you know, and also most buildings in a medieval city were fully out of wood. And it was then that the municipality said, well, no, we have to change that. We have to make the city safe for fires, because sometimes whole neighborhoods fire down in one night. So we have to replace the wood and at least the wooden facades with bricks. So at that moment in around 1600, a lot of the city changed from a wooden aesthetical quality to brick. And that's what we mostly see now in the canals. The canals are built with brick facades mainly. And so we have still some wooden examples, but they're very rare. So also at that time we had to change. Well, there's lots more to say about that, but if you look at the shift from the brick to the concrete, that started actually at the end of the 19th century, or in the second half of the 19th century. The concrete or the reinforced concrete came into development. Yeah. But then we still continued designing as it was brick, and only, well, even 50 years later, in the 20s with the Nieuwe Bouwen, then architects really understood the material and started to design with the material itself that was concrete. Now we make a shift again, and so it's a natural thing that sometimes our focus goes from one point to another material.
Yeah, but now we have the Paris Agreement, and we don't have that much time in a way.
But you asked me about the aesthetical quality, but you're absolutely right. Of course, sometimes aesthetical quality is not that important. You have on the table Diana and Bjarne, and they are AAA architects, and they really know how to design a beautiful building with a relatively new material. And so if you talk about aesthetics, it will maybe take some time before also the average housing block will understand how you make a nice facade and how you really use the product in itself to make a good design. In a way, we still design a bit with CLT as well as if it is concrete, which because it is firm and we like it like that, but to really get into the beautifulness that wood can have, we can still develop that more. So that will come, but let's rush it, because that's even more important than the aesthetical side. So go ahead, of course.
Yeah. And what part can the municipality play in this? You as a policymaker?
Well, let's say the two things that I would like to mention. First of all, we have this tenderbeleid, so we have design competition, or we have competitions, and that started in 2015, right in the middle of the crisis. That every plot we make a competition, so we never give a plot anymore to just a person or a party that we have relations with. So this tender policy has developed quite a lot, and in the beginning there was a lot of criticism because we tendered very much on the highest bid for the ground, but already from the beginning 30% of our system of judging a tender is for sustainability. This is policy from 2015. And more you see that it's not only the EPC, the energy value, that we are testing, but more and more the material and also the aesthetical side. But circularity is very important. So with every tender, we can choose what we want, where we want to focus on. And building with wood is very often now one of the criteria in tenders. Not everywhere. In some parts of the city, it would be really, a bit off. If you're building in the Amsterdamse schoolstijl, then if you have there one spot left over, then maybe it's good to go with brick and traditional materials, but then sustainability still is at least 30% of the points that we give to a tender. But building in wood is more and more also in tenders one of the main focuses for building. And on the other side, on the policy side, in the metropolitan area, we just started a kind of program that we try to push that in 2025, at least 20% of our housing production is built in wood. And that's not through a competition or anything, it's just making everybody motivated to use this material and help parties where are difficulties. And this is on a metropolitan area, Amsterdam metropolitan area scale.
Yeah, thank you.
So
but I think it's
we're really pushing it.
Yeah, do you recognize this?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we'll have to see what it brings. But I think the most important thing that Sabine was just pointing out is the long-term view, because as I was saying before, if demand and supply are out of balance for a year or a half year or a few months, people need to know that in 5 years' time, even if that happens, so even if prices for timber were to go up for a little while, that Amsterdam will still, or the metropolitan region, will still keep that kind of point in the future, because then the suppliers will keep on investing. And I think that's really important. We need to stretch out.
Cannot be a hype. It shouldn't be a hype.
Yeah, we need to
really
go over the hype, and it's been hyped for really the last couple of years. It's been super hyped, but it's really important to now get a long-term view, I think.
And that's something the city of Amsterdam could do. Should do.
So it's good that they're doing the tenders now, and I think it's even more important that they're saying in 2025 or even 2030 we will still be doing it, even if it kind of if we have to move a bit on pricing or other things.
Yeah, Sabine, would that be possible to make those agreements on the long term?
We work with. Yes, well, you're asking about ground prices now. If we can lower the ground price,
not the ground price, but
building. Is that your question?
No, your question was not the ground price, right? It was the market.
It's more. I was staying a bit more high level. I think it's good that you were saying we have our future point on 2025 and we will then be building in timber.
Absolutely, more than that.
And I'm only saying that
further than 25.
Yeah, exactly.
And also lower ground prices.
And then and then I
arrange that.
What Bjarne is saying and what I was suggesting is not necessarily lower ground prices now, but if that were to mean somewhere in the future, because the timber was out of balance in pricing, then you might need to think about what you do about these ground prices or about other things or other mechanisms.
I think it's very important to, if you look at timber, you have to invest also in the future of wood, which means you have to plant trees, as we just mentioned.
And build factories.
Yeah, and so we have at the moment in Holland no production facilities, zero, of wood, CLT.
Yeah.
We have 150 concrete mills. We have no sawmills in Holland anymore, zero. So that's a tremendous problem. But at the same time, we do have a history where... Yeah, we do have a history where, for example, if you see an old farmhouse with a huge beech tree next to it, it quite often means that that beech tree was planted the moment the farmer had bought off his house completely. So there was no... and then he planted a tree, and then it started to grow. Like a family, if a daughter was born, you planted 20 poplars, and then when the daughter was 18 years old or whatever, the poplars were big, and you could give that wood to the man that married your daughter. Yeah. So you see, and that's not for nothing. There's a lot of history on that you have to be very much forward thinking.
Yeah.
It's not new. It was there always. We need to be very forward thinking. And for example, if Amsterdam would be wise, they would lease a couple of million hectares somewhere in Finland or Sweden to secure their wood supply. Yeah. Just do it. I mean, it's probably damn cheap to do that. It's much cheaper than...
So you do say one of the obstacles or one of the future problems is going to be the supply of wood?
Well, of course, when we are going to build much more in wood, you can count on that there will be not shortages so much, but you have to reconfigure what you do. At the moment, 95% of the wood is just turned into pulp.
Yeah.
So it's not used at all for...
So it's a mindset, a change of mindset, and the infrastructure.
You have to be careful of what you do, like biomass now, energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's completely stupid, because if we are going to burn in the next 20 years wood, we just so the next 80 years we have to lower CO2 levels in the air. If we start now with biomass, I mean, where do we go? We first so it first goes up and then it goes down, and that is the worst thing you can do at the moment.
Yeah,
totally agree.
Yeah. So when we look at those, so this is one of the obstacles. I would like to focus on the obstacles. Why don't we, on big scale build in timber? Andrew, what's your opinion on that? What are the main obstacles for timber construction?
I think they're perception issues more than anything else. Yeah. I mean, I would like to back Bjarne up in his point that he just made about burning timber. I mean, we burn 55% of sawn timber in Europe. That's crazy. Yeah. You know, we should be using it to build buildings, not to burn down. So I think that's one really important issue. I think that, I think issues around our city, as Sabine was saying, kind of, the ambition that Amsterdam is showing, similar to Paris, where they've announced that 50% of government-funded buildings will be made of timber. In Berlin, they're about to announce a similar kind of level. So the ambition of cities is really laudable, really exciting. And these conversations, they're not going to get any quieter. It's not like in 2025, we're going to go, oh my goodness, do you remember 5 years ago when we used to talk about climate change? Thank goodness we're not talking about that anymore. I mean, these conversations are going to get louder and louder and louder. And I can only see these ambitions getting greater and greater.
I just also heard the concern of, building in timber could be a hype, and we should not let that happen. It's a risk.
Who said that? Donald Trump?
No, Jurien just mentioned, it shouldn't be a hype.
It should not be a hype.
It should not.
It should not be a hype.
No.
No, absolutely not. It's not a hype. It's the future.
Exactly.
It's the future. We can't build in concrete and steel. We can't do that. And timber is the only viable alternative.
In a way, I think people now even understand that a combustion engine will go. I mean, 20 years ago, probably would think, yeah, it's nice, those electric cars, but combustion engines will stay. I think we're now already at the point that we know it will go. And then in 20 years' time, we will probably think of combustion engines. What the fuck did we do then? Why did we use those combustion engines? So it will shift. And I think, therefore, even if timber buildings would be much more expensive now, just do it. Because, I mean, the first Tesla was also much more expensive.
Yeah, but why don't we just do it?
But, yeah, well, we do.
It's getting very slow, right?
It's getting there.
It's a cultural thing as well, as Andrew mentioned. I think I started my company in 2014, started talking about it in 2012, a bit later than you guys started. But I know that for sure that some boardrooms I walked out of, they were laughing afterwards.
Yeah,
because they thought, this is a crazy idea. It's a nice story, but who's going to really do this? Yeah. And I think that is now changed. I think I come in a lot of boardrooms now, and that they understand that there is a climate crisis and that we have to really change. And then building. You
know that the CEO of I won't give a name, but the CEO of one of the biggest housing investors in Holland, 3 years ago, I asked him to join in a tender on a wood building. He said, I don't know. No, let's not do it. So he didn't want to do it. I just got a phone call about a new tender where they join in, and he said, yeah, I'm completely into wood building.
Yeah.
So
that's good news.
Good news.
So this CEO changed in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
From I don't know to let's do it. I mean, and that is of course very, very important.
But there's one thing I would like to stress out: is a mistake that we could make now is to make buildings that are not functional, or that they have problems with acoustic and all these things, because then everybody will say, "Oh, you see, all these timber buildings, they don't work," and that's my nightmare, to be honest.
Yeah, of course. The first problems in wood building will have a tremendous
that will be
setback.
So the speed. Well, shouldn't be
so make sure that you and I think that's mostly a shout out to the contractors. Make sure that you know what you're doing, because otherwise we get a backlog. Yeah.
Technically, and also, I think qualitative as well. So those buildings need to be good buildings.
They need to be better buildings.
Better buildings. They need to be probably better than normal. And I think also, then just using maximum of timber is not the only thing we should judge the buildings on. It's also about, are we then happy with a building that we've built, and will they still be happy in it in 25 or 50 or 100 years' time?
Yeah. That's the really most sustainable. So if you make buildings
the most sustainable thing is if these buildings are good for a very long time. We don't have to take them down, rebuild them.
Yeah. But I've experienced in
that counts for every material.
Yeah, sorry?
Of course. You mean that's suitable for every material, should be for the long run, you mean?
Yes. As we speak, I'm in a country that you can call concrete wonderland. But
you're in Senegal.
Demolish a building I'm in Senegal, and everything is built in concrete. They make it in front of your house. And the industry, I just passed by this morning, you in a big cloud of dust to go along the industry there. It looks horrible. But as soon, even if they demolish concrete, then they use it to fill up the road or for other constructions. So there is not even one piece of concrete that is spoiled and used for nothing.
So you should appreciate every material.
Well, for wood.
Yeah. Sabine, I have to. I'm so sorry, but I have to. We're running out of time, and there's one last person I would love to give the word. That is Edwin Gardner. He is a futurist and an architect, and he depicts how the bio-based city of the future will or could look like. Edwin.
Yes, thank you. Behind me, or the images you will see, are drawn by Jan Kleine, which is an illustrator and graphic novelist living here in Amsterdam. And together with him, we're making a guide about a future Amsterdam in 2091. And this future Amsterdam is a scenario where everything has gone right, believe it or not. What would the world look like if we would make progressively the right decisions? But I want to share with you the long view, which starts with the Timber City and where we could go. Oh, sorry. Now you can hear me better. So, towards a city designed, built, and grown with the chemistry of life. The Timber City marks a transition that is larger than what one might at first consider. Until now, practically all modern materials are mined from our planet's crust, forged in blazing furnaces, and cracked at insane pressures in refineries. Whether we lived in the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, or the Iron Age, or our own glass, steel, and plastic age, to make materials we had to violently mine, burn, and hammer our stone, glass, and steel into existence. But today, a new era is dawning, where we are starting to move away from the chemistry of dead matter and are starting to wield the chemistry of living matter. Away from the materials that tectonic forces and geological time have provided us with, we are discovering how we may create with genetic engineering and the dynamism of biology. Constructing cities out of grown materials like trees is but the beginning. Now that we are slowly but surely starting to understand the language in which life is written, we are also starting to write in it. Bacteria and cells are becoming the tools of our creation. Mines, oil wells, refineries, and furnaces will be replaced with petri dishes, bioreactors, and breweries. One might wonder, will nature ever produce things that are as strong as steel, or as trustworthy as stone, or as transparent as glass? And will they be just as cheap? Well, actually, already today, there is a company that is biomanufacturing components for smartphones that are better quality, cheaper, and far less polluting. They are called Symergen. Google it. Z-Y-M-E-R-G-E-N. They made a film that is used in flexible circuits, displays, touch sensors, and printable electronics. It's made by fermentation, and it's already used in smartphones. The CEO of this company, Josh Hoffman, says that nature is much better at manufacturing than we are. It can make many more kinds of material with a much wider variety of characteristics than we could ever do with our industrial processes. He sees a future where material production isn't polluting, loud, and energy intensive. He sees a future where manufacturing materials looks more like brewing beer or making wine, where materials can be made at an industrial scale, but also locally and at a small scale, done by craftsmen and or engineers, at a biomaterials brewery down the street. Just like we are discovering how to brew milk and culture meat, we will also one day ferment bricks and grow cities. But we even could take it another step further. Why couldn't the materials that make our world stay alive? Perhaps we could make steel that grows stronger the older it gets, just like a tree. Or we could make walls that clean the air and that breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. Perhaps our houses will be like a garden, where we'll need to prune our balconies and water the floor. Who knows? Perhaps our city could suck in carbon and circulate it throughout its biodiverse structures. Perhaps we'll live in nature once again, back in an Eden of our own making. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you very much. It makes me very curious for this future you're describing, and a nice way of ending this evening because, well, the end is near. Well, as you might realize, there's a lot more to discuss, but fortunately, the next 2 weeks we're going to continue talking about this topic. Next week, we're going to focus on the role that timber can play in the huge demand of housing we have here in the Netherlands. But if you can't wait until next week, I recommend you to have a look on our website. We have many articles, or maybe you can consider to buy the book Tomorrow's Timber from Pablo van der Lugt. well, our livecasts are for free, and we would really love to keep it that way, but we do need your support. So in case you can miss a small amount or maybe even a bigger amount, you can make a donation by using the QR code you see on the screen now, and we really, really appreciate that. For the TV broadcasting, we have to stop now. If you're watching the stream, you can stay. And there is one more question I want to ask to the guests here on table. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank the guests for tonight. And I hope to see you next week. Have a nice evening. But on the stream, we can continue for a bit. I have a question from Sander. It's actually to all of you. Are there any regularity barriers experienced when a company tries to build with wood instead of conventional building materials, such as concrete and steel? When there are regulatory barriers, what can the local government do to solve them? So, yeah. I think that's maybe a question to Sabine.
Yes,
or do you
I'm here. Well, yes, there's an answer to that. Our city in Amsterdam, we choose to have a so-called welstandsbeleid. So we decide for every area, for every neighborhood, how we like to see the spatial quality. And for some areas, it can be. It's described that a construction in wood can disturb the unity of the area you are in. But that is not very often the case. So in most cases, when a building is really good designed, then also with welstands policy, wood construction is very, very possible. And you see that in there where we build in new areas like Amstelkwartier, like Eiburg, like Amsterdam Noord, Buiksloterham, but also in the West, and even in the Bijlmermeer, where you see a lot of concrete buildings still, that new buildings developed in wood are very much likely to come to develop on that. Yeah. So there is actually not a local rule that goes against that. Not at all. We support it very much.
I agree. And the other thing is that I think, especially in North America, Canada, they are probably very jealous of our regulatory system, because the Dutch system is based on is a performance-based code, as they say. So as long as we can engineer to show that something will comply and will stand up and it will resist fire, and as long as we can prove that by calculations and tests, then we can build with it. And in many other countries, I think you, Andrew, can enlighten us on the UK, but in many countries, specifically in the US and Canada, it's topped. So it's actually in the code, it says you cannot build taller than, for instance, 6 stories. Germany is actually the same way.
Germany is very problematic in that sense.
It's very problematic in many other countries, and we, in the Netherlands, the good thing is that we can probably be an example to how you can deal with codes in such a way that you allow for innovations like this much more efficiently and faster.
There is maybe one downside that we all probably can mention, and that's the MPG. So that's the material performance indicator. And as you see now, is that for example, a steel beam is rewarded at the moment in these regulatory standards, because it lasts really long, so you can cut down half of the emissions initially. You can cut that down to half because it lasts long. But we have a climate crisis now, and not in 100 and 200 years. So you have to look at what's going on at this moment. And then, for example, timber, it stores CO2, but that's not in the same regulatory index.
Luckily, they're really on top of that already.
Yeah, so that's going to change probably.
That's going to change, but it's to stress it out.
I said at this moment that our span of attention in Holland is sometimes a bit too small. That we have all the so we are, but that same flexibility, we can even sell our mother-in-law, more or less, here in Holland. But that flexibility is also a pro.
Yeah.
So we are we now are on biomass. What is it? biomass burning, and the moment we subsidize it, we are already talking about the fact that we should take it away.
Yeah.
So they switch quite
Not very
clearly,
constantly.
and in building codes, it's performance-based and it's not prescribed. That helps.
I think that's a good thing. You then have to get your long-span ambitions, long-term ambitions, right?
And that's the key word, actually, long-term ambitions.
Long-term.
All right, so we have to stop. Thank you again very much. Andrew and Sabine as well, thank you so much for keeping your attention the whole hour here. We really appreciated it.
No problem at all.
Great.
Thank you.
But
very good to meet you like this, virtually, this time.
And Andrew, what are you building
Good
in...
to see you all.
Yeah.
Andrew, what are you building in Amsterdam? Just tell us.
Oh, you know how fast timber buildings are. By the time we finish, you'll turn around and it'll be finished.
Yeah.
Good. Nice to hear.
Ja. Oké, ja, we gaan eruit. Hartelijk bedankt voor het kijken. Hele fijne avond en tot volgende week hopelijk. Volgende week maandag.